Hey guys, how you doing today? This is John Klein with Brandwith. We're here with Tony Mogavero, CEO, co-founder, entrepreneur. How you doing today, Tony?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I
Yeah, super
appreciate it.
excited to talk to you. Well, let's just start off from the beginning. Go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite the entrepreneurial journey. I started kind of my career in media and technology, and so I've kind of kept that thread going. I had a couple different things going on while I was in college. I was producing music. I had a record label, but then I was also going to school for engineering, computer engineering, and so was always kind of fascinated with this intersection of media and technology. And one of the first things that I built was like a live streaming application for like B2B communications. So like companies like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were live streaming shareholder meetings in the early internet, like even like pre-YouTube days. And so really cut my teeth in the media business writing that kind of software, and this is all pre-cloud as well. So it was difficult to build infrastructure to support this. And now you can just click buttons like we just did on to set up this podcast, right? It's click a couple buttons and you're ready to go. This setup used to be very hard to do. So now it's so much easier. But of course the media tech space has evolved, and I've been staying at the kind of cutting edge intersection of where those two places meet, and got into virtual reality video streaming when Oculus was a Kickstarter. Really enjoyed kind of playing with that. I was in Bitcoin in 2012. Live streaming video in like 2005. So like all of these things I've been like really excited about along the journey. I built a music streaming application, music kind of data application that went viral and got a ton of users, but it didn't have any data, so it was hard to kind of scale that business. So I built a live streaming company for, kind of marketing videos. It was live and on demand, as like one of my first real entrepreneurial endeavors, and had customers like American Airlines and Pepsi, and doing marketing videos and like HR training videos. So this is like right when smartphones started to happen. The iPhone got released, and it was still actually kind of challenging to get video onto a smartphone. And so built a developer centric kind of B2B service for getting content onto smartphones. And ultimately, like when I went out to try to raise capital for that, I bootstrapped it and just had a couple other people working on it with me. And when I went out to try to raise capital for it, found somebody that wanted to buy it. And so we got a deal done, and then ultimately that brought me to Denver to build out what I thought would be a media incubator, and put investments in a few media companies, and then use this kind of infrastructure to backbone these media companies. But that morphed into what became like a co-working space and a venture fund and a code school. And that the company that turned into Galvanize is the company that ultimately we built up there. And we had a $10 million venture fund, and we were investing in companies that were in the co-working space. And then we had opportunistically like companies like Box and Uber were in our co-working space. So like the Uber Denver office was in our building. And so it was a pretty great environment, but it started to get away from like the media tech that I was interested in love with. So started working with a couple guys on what became like a VR streaming platform. So like I said, I started playing around with the Oculus and got really excited about that. And it was really hard to get video onto an Oculus Rift. And so the same thing with smartphones. I saw that with VR and said, there's something here. And so built a streaming network for of VR headsets, and got, pretty quickly every major studio and broadcaster was coming to us trying to get their content onto our platform. And, that also led to investment, the strategic investors coming in from like Sony and Disney and Warner Music Group, and, Tornante led our Series A, which is Michael Eisner's company, former CEO of Disney for many years, and like, legend in Hollywood. And so, we were a global leader in the VR space, but in kind of 2018, 2019, VR took a turn, and everybody just stopped building devices. They stopped making content. So we had a real moment as a company to say like, okay, well, what do we do here? Every one of our competitors in the space just basically folded or, died, and they had to pivot or, whatever. And so we did the same thing. I mean, we said, okay, we have enough of a dedicated user base that we can continue to build, but we have to rethink the business a bit in terms of what we do with kind of content and how we approach it. So we started supporting traditional video content instead of just VR. And but that's not enough of a differentiator. So 2017 is really when we started playing around with smart contracts and Web3, and we built custom smart contracts for content in 2017, 2018, and I think our instincts were right. We were just a little bit early, and even in that regard, Web3 is still finding its legs, but that's when we really started to get excited about what the opportunity was with smart contracts in Web3. So we essentially built up a platform that allows you to upload video much like YouTube, and we have apps everywhere like Android TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, PlayStations, mobile devices, etc. Upload video and manage channels much like YouTube, but put it into smart contracts where you can monetize and pay out collaborators and set royalties and limit the editions or create unlimited editions, and essentially all the value that you gain from smart contracts and all the transparency you gain from the blockchain, you can easily go audit the purchase trail on chain. And so, we built that into the platform as a key differentiator to, what we have and where we see the future of media going. And if you look at, where you see, the Actors Guild and the Writers Guild going on strike, you see streaming platforms are like not disclosing their numbers anymore, right? In terms of subscribers, the ability to audit these platforms and find out, how much you should be getting paid as a creator, those doors are closing. And so you have the rise of the creator economy. Really, it's been going for years, but it's still growing. It's explosive growth. And then you have like kind of the premium end of the spectrum in Hollywood closing their doors kind of more consistently. And so it's perfect timing for, a platform that makes the payment process more transparent and instant and easier between people who might just be a single person in their bedroom, or 5 or 6 people who put together a podcast and everybody needs to get paid. You can build all of that stuff into the smart contract so that you don't have to manage a bunch of different bank accounts and pay people out 60 days later or 90 days later or whatever. So there's a lot of value there, but we're now of course in the education period of educating the industry and creators and getting everybody excited about it. And so that's what RAD TV is today. It's a creator-centric platform, very much like YouTube or Patreon in terms of giving creators a platform and giving them tools to get paid, and then using Web3 and blockchain to make that 100x more efficient. So yeah, that's kind of the meandering journey of where we got to today. Ultimately, building the platform. RAD TV, that's my focus today.
Man, that's awesome. So RAD TV, what would you like compare it to? Is it more like of a YouTube, more like of a Twitch?
Yeah, well, we can support live content, but it's live is very expensive, and not it's not easy. We can do it. I've been doing it for a long time, but it's not easily monetizable, and the distribution at scale ends up being tricky. So we still focus on-demand video, and so probably a lot more like you know YouTube or Patreon, really. The goal being, like, we don't want people just uploading like random vacation videos. We are trying to really think about the professional creator, even if it's an individual creator, and what can they do to access new storytelling, and do it in a way that gives them the infrastructure to more easily manage their business. And so, we're also, very open to the AI content piece of this, which, AI is an interesting kind of content type because it blurs the lines in some cases with copyrights. And, I know you've seen this out in the world, but, from a copyright perspective, all the generative AI platforms have been training on some bucket of content that nobody is sure exactly what everything has been training on. They're just assuming that the only way you can get cinematic level quality with a generative AI video platform is that if you trained it on Saving Private Ryan or whatever. Maybe true, maybe not, but there's lawsuits flying and whatnot. And I think from our perspective, when you look at us as a platform and kind of where we fit, the best analogy is it's YouTube or Patreon. But I think our stance on AI content in particular is that it's still largely falling into the fair use category. There's a lot of unknowns in terms of how best to address attribution in that content. And as people are figuring it out, we're pro creator. So, why would we limit creators in their ability to tell stories? So we're wide open, and when it comes to AI, and we found a good group of creators who are making amazing things using that technology, and are having a hard time telling that story in different places. Even allowing like curse words or nudity, right? Like there's some parts of creative storytelling that'll just get you banned from Instagram, and YouTube will preemptively take your things down if they think that you might be wading into some weird copyright territory, or if somebody goes and claims that YouTube's automated system, because they have such a huge volume, YouTube's automated system will just demonetize you or take you out of the pool, and then you have to take weeks or months of petitions and whatnot. So we're taking the flip side of that and saying, we trust that you as the creator you're making the right decisions in terms of your content. If you're blatantly stealing things, then somebody can come claim it with DMCA. But at the end of the day, like, be creative and feel like we're a flexible alternative to those other platforms.
Yeah. And you kind of already said it, but I guess what is the benefit specifically to creators to maybe post something on you guys? Is it just the creative ability to post absolutely whatever they want? And what?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, like, yeah, the creativity is kind of paramount, and so we can expand the pool of content that we take in as a result of that. It can be up to not safe for work, just to a degree, right? Like, lots of rated R movies would be considered not safe for work. So it's weird in the social sphere that you kind of, when you say not safe for work in the social sphere, that's somehow different than saying rated R in the movie business. But they're similar in that regard. The ability for AI creators to kind of upload and feel that they have a voice and that they can sell their content, even though some people say that you can't own or sell AI content. again, like I don't think we have enough precedent to really say what that means yet. So we're of course letting people monetize AI driven content right now. The the smart contract ability is kind of a true fundamental difference and a moat in that it's hard to build that infrastructure to mint videos on chain, limited editions, open editions, collaborator payments, royalties, resales, all of that stuff are technically supported. So that we feel like is a true paradigm shift in how content is moving, just much like in the blockchain space, how financial system has moved from traditional finance to now it's moving on chain. We will see, and we have already started to see, even with NFTs, the run up and the kind of blow off, and now it's like we're starting to see things happen again. The media business will also move on chain, and it probably will be that it falls into the background, much like is happening in the finance side of things with blockchain. So it's a big key differentiator for us. And then we have distribution into VR. This is probably the smaller end of the kind of differentiator spectrum, but we have apps on PlayStation VR and apps on Meta Quest, and so there's not really very many video options in those places. So if you want to distribute 360-degree video, 180-degree video, 2D, 3D, we can ingest up to 8K in terms of resolution, and we transcode all of that and make sure that it plays well across devices. So we have some unique distribution endpoints that people can get to, particularly in VR. And then there's one other piece of what we built that people pay for, interestingly, is that we originally built this feature for producers to test content on the platform, because uploading an 8K video that's 500 gigabytes master file, like if you try to upload that to a website just to test it, it could take a long time, particularly in a VR headset. So we built this feature that allows people to sideload content, and so they can just plug in a hard drive or a USB and have whatever content on it that they want to test it in VR headsets. And so we originally built that as a business tool for producers to test their content more easily, but then consumers figured it out, and so they started loading up whatever they wanted on their USBs or on their hard drives and plugging it into PlayStations and Meta Quest headsets and side loading the content. And so as part of the kind of premium package, we that's a feature that people pay us for. It's almost like a little bit like Plex. You can hook up media servers. If you have Plex, you can run that into the RAD apps. If you have Jellyfin media server, you can run that into our apps. So we really tried to make it so that you have content options through us that you don't really have anywhere else. And so it's there's nuances to what we built that we feel like there's a new type of consumer and a new type of creator that are converging on this feature set. They want more control over their content. They want more transparency. They want to be able to say and do whatever they want for the most part, as long as it's not illegal online. And how do you differentiate as a company in the streaming space? You either pay an enormous amount of money for premium content that nobody else has and make it exclusive to try to get users, or you invent new forms of distribution and add new features that people didn't have previously. And so we fit in that camp of features and capabilities and pushing the boundaries, because if you know the budgets, it's like Netflix spends $17 billion a year on content, a year. That's just on the content. So how do you keep up with that? Even if a new media company wanted to spend $100 million a year on content, how do you do that? How you can't keep up? So really innovation is kind of the only way. And time finding the right pocket of people with the right technology at the right time is one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur, particularly in like any kind of high tech field. And we've been, trying to thread that needle over a number of years. Thankfully, we've been able to stay at it. Yeah.
Yeah, man, no, that's awesome. How does people exactly make money on here, and then how do you guys also make money?
Yeah. Yeah, so two ways. I mean, we have a subscription where, viewers can come subscribe for 6.99. We have a higher end package that unlocks more capabilities for like 29.99. And then we have the ability for creators to sell individual pieces of content, whether they're limited editions or open editions. So you can make collectible content or just wide open kind of transactional video on demand. And so in both of those scenarios, well, the transactional video on demand is pretty simple because if somebody comes in and they say a creator makes a music video available for sale for $3, then somebody comes in and they buy that. The math is pretty easy. We start at like 70-30 splits, and so just consider it that, right? On the subscription side of things, the math is a little bit different, but it's still pretty straightforward. We still break up like 70-30, but 70% goes to all the creators who have put their content into the subscription, and then they get paid out on a minutes watch basis. So essentially they're competing for minutes watched with all the other creators who are in the subscription plan, and then we pay out based on minutes watched. So if you get 10% of the total viewership minutes on the platform, then you get 10% of the 70%. And so the math is pretty straightforward in that regard. We're in the process of looking at opening up individual channel subscriptions for individual creators. We've gotten that feedback a bunch, and individuals want to put their own channel behind their own subscription, priced their own way, not essentially in the giant subscription. So we're in the process of wiring that up essentially, which will open up that capability. And then we actually do a number of deals, like B2B type deals as well. People know us more as a consumer company, but we've worked with major Fortune 500 companies, like done commercial deals with Google and Verizon and NBC Universal, and we've like every major media and tech company we've done something with, whether it's in VR or AR or Web3 or AI. We did a big thing with Donna Karan. They re-released their logo as it's like an AI generated video, but they released it as an NFT and sold that. Like, we've done some pretty crazy stuff for big brands and big tech companies. And so as we're building out this creator centric platform and like new mechanism for distribution, we as innovators can help these huge companies with different initiatives, whether it's marketing related or platform related or whatever. So yeah, that's how we make money ultimately.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. So, how much of this, because I know, and I love that you're in like Web3 and it's the future and smart contracts, how much of all those transactions is smart contracts?
It's still pretty small. I mean, if you look at the industry overall, there were months when NFTs were absolutely flying, and it was like $5 to $7 billion of volume a month in the NFT space, and it was maybe even more than that at the peak, and that died off pretty substantially. If you look at the real numbers, not wash trading and bots and whatnot, it's really kind of like maybe 100,000 people is being generous over the whole crypto industry. And if you're being really honest, it's probably more like in the 10,000 to 20,000 range of people who are like really in it and actively kind of embracing the technology and buying NFT art and really participating in the ecosystem. And so any numbers that you see outside of that are probably a lie. So the way we view Web3 is that this will take a long time to build. It's like Coinbase now has 110 million crypto customers or whatever, somewhere around that. And it's mostly them just flipping meme coins or buying Bitcoin or Ethereum and holding it and moving into the media space and saying, well, now you have this cryptocurrency, whether it's a stable coin or some Ethereum or whatever, you can do other things with it. Here are the other things that you can do with it. That is truly starting to manifest now. And, Coinbase has been driving a lot of that with their base blockchain and the initiative around the base app and making discoverability for companies like us. Like if you go into the Coinbase interface now and you look at their Web3 section, their kind of marketplace for Web3 applications, we're like number 3 in the social section of like applications. So essentially what you have is a small group of people, collectively over the whole industry, truly participating in what would be considered kind of NFTs, limited editions, open editions, collectibles, those kinds of things. But you have a tsunami of people who are being exposed to crypto for the first time and saying, okay, well, what can I do with this beyond just like buy Bitcoin and hold, So, that's kind of where we're at. We got 1 million people watching on the free side on RAD TV and 50,000 on the kind of subscriber side. So that's really kind of Web 2 era. Web 3 era is still early, and it's any platform doing anything more than hundreds or low thousands of transactions. That's in the realm of what they're really doing. Anything else is kind of manufactured support. So we'll continue to build in that space. We call it Web 2.5. I think we'll be in the Web 2.5 era easily until 2030, and maybe even longer than that. Coinbase itself is Web 2.5. You log in with a username and password. They're a Web 2 company. They just give you access to crypto. So we'll probably live in that era, and it's a multi-$100 billion opportunity in the Web 2.5 space. The onboarding of
To Web3.
people to Web 3 is going to take a long time, and it's going to continue. And I mean, look at what happened in the finance business. That's like collectively from a finance perspective, crypto is like topped 4 trillion yesterday or the day before. And that's largely financially driven. Like when you look at the rest of the media business and media and technology that sits outside of the finance space is like a $2 trillion global business. So as we start to tap into the efficiencies, we'll start to see that industry shift as well. But it's still, the technology is still a little bit clunky. It's what's a wallet? I have to connect it. I have to have crypto in this wallet and bridge it over here. It's like, it's still a little bit messy. So honestly, we're trying to push it into the background as much as we can so that people don't have to interact with it. Nobody likes to read. Humans are lazy. If they get one little bit of friction on something, they'll just check out or say, this isn't for me.
So true.
The crypto heads, like the maxis and like the real people that see what's happening in this tech, they've gotten over the hurdles already, and they continue. So it's a lot easier. But new people coming into the space, it's still a little bit clunky, the onboarding process. So it's an evolution. We'll get there.
Yeah. What do you think is like the evolution part? Do you think education more, and where should people go to maybe get more educated on it, on Web3?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things. I think the terminology needs to get better. Nerds aren't very good at branding. So when you talk like the term NFT itself is like easy to say out loud, but then nobody knows what it is. So then when you say what it is, non-fungible token, that also is confusing to people. That doesn't help clarify anything. It's like HTTP. It's like we still type that in when we're typing in URLs, and most people in the world can't tell you what HTTP means. And so we have all of these protocols that people used to. I mean, the web was confusing like this in the early days. People were like, why do I have to, I can't just mail this letter. I have to put an @ sign, and like, what is all this? It's like a weird language. .com, what is that? So, I think there's an approachability kind of a branding issue that it just takes a while for people to get comfortable with that. Like, instead of having an email address, which people used to be uncomfortable with, now they're very comfortable with. Now it's you have a wallet address, and people don't. They're like, "What is this?" It's like this huge hash. I don't know what this means. There's no friendly names for it, or there are, but it's like still tricky to get to. So there's that, right? To some degree, you have to be able to get crypto, so you have to create new banking relationships, essentially, with an on-ramp. So I keep saying Coinbase because everybody knows it and they're based in the US, but there's a bunch of other ones that do it. But you have to set up an account there. You have to set up KYC and go through proving who you are, and maybe uploading your passport, and depending on the level of your account, like connecting your credit card and sending them financial statements and like all of those things, right? And people are in their minds are already like, well, I have a bank account. Why do I need to do this again? And what's interesting about the current administration, love it or hate it, it's moving banking into a place where they can actually offer these instruments as a service. And that's something that, like, when you have the mass market they already have a bank, and that's the trusted relationship that they have for all of their finances. So if a bank can start to offer crypto services, stable coins, and the purchase of Bitcoin and the purchase of Ethereum, then you open up a whole different world of consumer kind of adoption, right? So there's the branding problem. There's the kind of onboarding into getting the assets themselves so you can actually transact in the Web3 space, and then UX is still a problem. It's somebody comes to a website, they want to create an account as quickly as possible, so they can create an account. And in a lot of cases, they don't have a wallet. So if you're a pure Web3 platform and you make them connect a wallet for the very first time, instead of just put in their username and password, which the mass market, that's all they do, right? Or click the button that says connect with Google, or connect with whatever, Facebook. People immediately back out because they're like, well, I don't have a wallet. I don't know what wallets are, so I'm out. I can't even engage in this because it's like completely different than I'm used to. So, those types of user experience issues are, what we're seeing is platforms moving to creating wallets under the hood for people, custodying those wallets, which does provide a lot of value and reduce a lot of friction, but it also
And that's like the 2.0 you're talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely 2.0. But it does give them a wallet, and they don't have to create it
2.5.
themselves.
Yeah.
So it's those are the kinds of things. The problem with custody is that, like, as soon as you custody someone's assets, now you can be liable, right? Like, if you lose their assets. So all these Web3 platforms want people to self-custody their assets. And but that's also a big piece of the kind of UX conversation in terms of adoption, that it would make lives a lot easier if platforms could more easily custody, but they can't because of regulations and liability, honestly.
Right. Yeah. Because I meant to say like 2.5 because Coinbase holds the wallet, holds the keys to your wallet. They have the funds and the keys, and you just have access to it. which is that
Mhm.
like kind of that slow bridge, but then like they made base where you can hold the keys. But that's so interesting, and I'm curious: are you gonna ever come out with your own coin, maybe as part of the subscription, and you divvy out the coins to as part of the subscription? Say it's like 10 rad coins, seven go to different percentages of that seven. Like 0.001 or something like that can go to all the creators for watch time, something like that.
Yeah.
You ever thinking of doing that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, one thing I guess I should have really mentioned when I was talking about the subscriptions is that we did release an NFT that represents the subscription called the Stream Pass. And you can buy that as a one-time purchase, but it gives you access to all the subscription features. So,
Hmm.
and it's effectively like buying 2 years of subscription in advance. But then once you own that, you own it, and you can actually resell it even, which
Okay.
is pretty crazy. Yeah, like,
So the goal
um,
is it to be more valuable when Web3 is really in, and
yeah.
a
Well, it
pass like
has
that would
inherent
be,
value. Yeah, and it's
yeah.
limited edition, so it's like you're a super user and you bought an NFT, and now you don't have to pay a recurring fee, and it's our way of like exploring how can you take the subscription model and reinvent it in the Web3 space. There's obviously like there's still kind of tricky ways to do this from a subscription perspective that you can get access to somebody's wallet and then have them consistently drip payments to you via Web3 rails, but it's still not perfect yet. So, we just said buy this NFT and you get all you can eat access essentially. But that said, we also built a platform, in 20, just kind of started in 2017 and released it in 2018 that was really designed to be like a peer-to-peer streaming platform that had a native token called ARA, ARA. And so we actually built that platform and we're about to release it right into the middle of crypto winter. And so we released the platform, we put it on mainnet, it's out there, it worked, it used ETH as the backbone and had its own token. And it saw definitely some attention. Then crypto winter kind of iced it, and we had to we had to put it on the back burner to some degree. Regulatory issues were not clear. We were in New York. The whole team was in New York, and New York has the bit license, so everything was illegal essentially that we were doing. I mean, not really. We didn't do anything illegal,
No,
but
I
you know what I mean. Like
regulatory, SEC,
it
all
was
that stuff.
it
Yeah,
was unclear. We built a
unclear.
utility. Yeah, we built a utility token, and you needed to use the token to operate the network, and but it was still unclear. Like we couldn't get any lawyers to say that like utility tokens were a safe asset class, even though like now you're seeing everything that about Ripple and all of these. Like, it's all very clear, becoming more clear now. So anyway,
Mhm.
that said, we released a token, but it had different incentives. The incentive was to host and deliver content. So if you became a peer in the network and you were holding, a movie or a documentary or something on your hard drive or even a game or an album, then anybody buying that game in the future would pull that content from the peers, and then the peers would get rewarded in tokens
Mm.
to host and deliver the content. On Ethereum, that became exorbitantly expensive, and especially during like the gas wars of the NFT hype. So the
Yeah.
system became unusable. With layer twos, that the game has kind of changed, and Solana certainly has helped. But that means like rewriting all of that stuff from scratch, which doesn't really make sense. So what we've talked about doing more recently is and I will say one thing about the ARA tokens is like if even today still if you have 100,000 ARA tokens, you can unlock the platform much like you can with the Stream Pass. But we kind of like took the token itself and replaced that with an NFT because it's like a little bit more straightforward. The Stream Pass,
Hmm.
and then we've been talking about releasing a new RAD branded token using all of the modern technologies that we have today with layer twos and super fast, cheap processing and of transactions, and then realigning the incentives around viewership and you know why do you reward somebody, where and how do you reward them, you know do you how can you incentivize holding in the right way to reward people for holding. One thing that we
Speaking of
saw,
like,
and I'm sure you've seen, all these platforms that have built like farming mechanisms to bootstrap an early audience, they all the same thing happens. They'll give away a bunch of tokens in like season one or season two, and like you're basically farming engagement, and then everybody accumulates these tokens, and then when all the farming is over, they sell all the tokens, and the tokens go to zero,
mm,
and so then you've misaligned all of the incentives. Like you got some fake early engagement, but then everybody disappears and they're on to the next farming opportunity, and then your token dies. So we've seen a lot of these ups and downs, and really thought about how to you know present the right engagement mechanisms that don't like ultimately like kill the platform, and kill the engagement and kill the token value, and then everybody's upset, like literally on all sides of the equation. And if you just don't make that mistake up front,
right.
you're instantly in a better place. Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of history, as well as like a long-winded answer to say that yes, we have a stream pass. There are stream pass holders. We're looking at a new token, and the stream pass holders, obviously, we know their wallets. We can we can reward them, more than we can reward other people, but also like looking at like how can normal creators get rewarded, how can consumers get rewarded, and what can we do from you know a hold mechanism that encourages kind of holding and engaging over mass extraction and selling. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I don't have a timeline on that, but
Mm.
it's a it's a crazy bull market right now. So now would be a pretty good time.
Yeah. Did you say you're gonna backbone with Solana now instead of ETH?
I mean, we to date we built everything originally on ETH, and then we incorporated Base. So as a layer two, Base has been at least the tip of the spear. Solana requires building a bunch of new infrastructure, which is not impossible, but it just takes time. So from speed to market perspective, we're kind of leaning towards Base, but Solana really, I mean, as is things are more fast and furious there. There's a lot of kind of meme energy and degen activity that's happening there. So,
Yeah.
if you want to capture those people and give access to that community, then Solana is also a good choice. But Solana is just fast and cheap. It's a layer one. It's it has a bunch of real activity on it, and so we're still kind of debating that right now, but leaning a little bit towards Base.
Nice. Okay. Because I know, I mean, man, President Trump making a meme coin, first off, was outrageous, and backing it with Solana, was just so
Yeah,
crazy. The president of the United States making a cryptocurrency, and just kind of shows you that, times are changing.
yeah, wild. It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. So are you going to do kind of like a staking mechanism, or you were talking about the different farming? Is this going to be a utility coin or more like a currency? Like you need the coin to actually open and transact?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to build a currency. I mean, one of the things that we saw previously is that like if you create a token and then you reward with the token,
Hmm.
then people sell the token, and there's just kind of like this never-ending downward pressure
Right.
on it.
Right.
And so, the real opportunities are, you know, say you have real commerce coming in via subscriptions, or people buying a piece of transactional content on chain, and there's a revenue split associated with that. One example would be if you buy and hold a certain number of tokens as a creator, then you get better revenue shares based on the real economic activity that's coming to you. So
Exactly right.
you're essentially and your opportunity to earn. So you as a creator, if you post 10 videos a month, you can get rewarded the tokens, but the more tokens you hold, the better revenue shares you get on the real commerce that's happening on the platform. So the platform takes less of a cut and rewards the creators back more of the real money for holding the token. So it ends up being that the dollars, literal fiat that's coming into the platform, or the the ETH that's transacting in the Web3 space, is the that increases, and that's what people look at as like where their value is accruing to. The tokens themselves are meant to be accumulated and held because they improve your economics on fiat and ETH essentially. So that creates hold essentially mechanisms that say, okay, I'm being rewarded, but I'm not. My reward is not to accumulate this token as much as I can and sell it and try to extract value from the token. It's that I'm going to get better economics on this real platform that has real economic activity. It's almost like Patreon. If you sign up for like Patreon Ultra Premium, you get better revenue shares. And so, same thing with the Web3 space is how can you give people better economics on a real economy, but use tokens as a mechanism to like point to that value. So, that's just like one of the examples. We're reluctant to say like watch to earn. That's one of the easiest things for people to think of when you're watching content. It's like,
Mm,
can I earn if I just sit here and watch this thing? And that
right.
you can imagine like the attack vectors on that is like, well, I'll just open 10 browsers and I'll farm
Right.
this, and
Right.
and then as soon as I accumulate enough, I'll just go sell it, on
Hmm.
DeFi. So, we're super reluctant to give those kinds of rewards, and they just don't help anybody. The scammers and farmers will come in and wreck the whole ecosystem if you present that as an opportunity, versus like
Yeah.
as a creator, you're actually contributing to the ecosystem and you're earning more based on your essentially your engagement in the platform is accumulating a balance, a token balance that gives you better economics on the actual platform.
Mm,
So we're trying to align incentives in that way, and not
yeah.
it'll just piss everybody off if you if you allow the mass extraction. We've seen it over
Right.
and over and over again. Yeah.
Well, then it might even be better to do like a well, you get those like viral videos that don't get a lot of subscriptions, but they get a lot of views, but then almost like only reward based off of subscriptions. That way it's performance based, and the more views you get, the more that the program or RAD will promote that video to get more views to hopefully get more subscriptions, but maybe only rewarding off of subscriptions is something you can't get stolen. Um,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
but then you'd have to have a way to like how to keep those subscriptions. So if those people aren't continuing to like subscribe, maybe like renew their subscription to that person, which I guess could be free or not to that person, they don't have to go away, because otherwise, yeah, you're just getting that coins. Just yeah. Well, interesting.
Hmm.
But what I wanted to go there. Anything else you wanted to add on that? Because we're gonna move on to.
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. What I wanted to talk about was education. So where you guys started in coding, programming. Tell me a little bit about that. What languages did you learn?
I mean, I learned, C and Java in the early days, and when I got into like low level, kind of low latency streaming stuff, I even had to do like get into some assembly stuff, which was terrible. But then I taught myself Python, and then of course all the web tech stuff. You have to kind of know full stack web tech stuff. So that was the foundation of everything. And then the team is kind of meandered in various different languages. I mean, a lot of what we build from a web perspective is, JavaScript, Next.js, React, Native, like that kind of stuff. Obviously, when you get into the Web3 side of things, you have to have knowledge of smart contracts and whether it's, Solidity or whatever. So we picked that up along the way. It was interesting in kind of like 2017. Nobody was an expert in Solidity. You had to learn it, and that was from scratch pretty much. They don't teach that in any schools. It's just like you had to pick it up. So yeah, building out the different layers in various different languages. And then we used to have servers in New York, so we had in our office, we had a server room with like real servers processing content and processing like big data type stuff. And we were running like super pro NVIDIA GPUs, like the $10,000 and $20,000 NVIDIA cards locally in our office, and which was a lot of fun. We actually did a partnership with NVIDIA, and they were writing articles about us and whatnot. So we've had like some pretty meaningful local infrastructural things, but then we've also just like heavily leaned into the cloud. I mean, you have to at this point. So yeah, that's the full stack is kind of built in that way. And it's almost like you get dragged into some of these things with technology, but it's like React Native and Next.js, and it's just like that seems like what everybody wants to build in everywhere. And if you're doing anything with data, or AI in particular, then Python, you need to know Python. So that's kind of where everything has landed, at least to date.
How long do you think that's going to be relevant for?
I mean, Python, from an AI perspective, is pretty dominant. They just very early on were building a lot of the libraries for, processing that kind of information, machine learning and, scientific kind of data, big data stuff. And, it feels like you got enough big organizations pushing React Native and Next.js and, Google and Facebook being behind those things, that really has driven a lot of the narrative. We were using frameworks in other projects and in early days around like Ruby on Rails and Django, those kinds of things. And once you start to get big corporations like Google and Facebook and Meta, like really pushing frameworks on people, GraphQL and like that kind of stuff, you really just have to start figuring out how to adopt that, because that's where the industry will go. That's where all the developers have knowledge, that kind of thing. So that's probably why Ethereum, even as slow as it was able to have so much staying power, even with it being so expensive to use, is because they had so many developers, and versus like Solana developers, were essentially learning an entirely new thing, even though for 5 years, 4 or 5 years, they had already been really learning Solidity. So yeah, I feel like with the current model that we're in right now, we'll see less innovation and movement on the software, the kind of programming languages, and more going into like the connective tissue between kind of AI bots, really. And the hard engineering of creating a new language, like Go, for example, like just looking at like what's wrong with programming languages and creating some new programming language, that we're probably not going to see much more of that for a while, just because now all the brain drain that's kind of happening by people just getting comfortable using AI. It's like you don't have to learn the deep down dark secrets of interpreters and writing a programming language from scratch. You have all the tools, and now all you need is like to just go into Cursor or GPT and say like, I need this done, and it'll write it for you. And so I don't know. What I hope doesn't happen is a degradation of what we see from a hard tech kind of and low level understanding of of programming and software engineering and scalability and whatnot. But it looks like AI is degrading that a bit. So we'll have to see.
Man, yeah. So if somebody wanted to, get educated in Web3 and kind of, get more, maybe like get, because I mean, that is kind of the future, getting into the programming of these AI systems, of these crypto platforms, of utility coins and stuff like that. Where do you think they should go to get that education?
Yeah, I mean, um, there's a lot of videos that are being created and just put out online that are good kind of starting points. I mean, I would try to learn. It's really simple to just go into an AI platform now and say, I want to do this, give me the answer. And if you went into any AI platform now and said, I need a smart contract to mint an NFT, it would give you the smart contract, but you would have no understanding of what is actually happening there.
Right, right,
So, you need to really go to the source and understand what's happening and why you're including these open Zeppelin libraries, or why only the owner of the contract should be able to execute this one function versus the other functions, right? Like, and how and where you do that. So it really is, it feels comfortable and easy, and you feel like a genius to go to AI and say, do this thing for me, but you really should um, go to the source. And AI may be a starting point, like you can also say, I don't understand what this means. um, you know, tell me more about it or
right,
whatever. And
right.
it can
Yeah.
be, it's an educational opportunity that is really valuable. But I mean, I didn't know Solidity, and I just started learning and playing around with it and trying to build smart contracts. And then all of a sudden you start to get the external tools, and you're creating a smart contract and you're publishing it, you're testing it in Remix, and you're running it locally and connecting up to a local Ethereum node. Like, you start to like learn these things by doing. And so you know that's, depending on where you're going, I would, if it's on the Ethereum side or the Solana side, or whatever it is, if it's NFTs or if it's finance driven or whatever, I would start as close to the source as possible and learn the real stuff, even though the learning curve is harder. The vibe coding movement, I mean, you've probably seen it, but it's clearly like people going in and saying, well, I'll just vibe code this together in a weekend and it's going to work. Like, none of that is manifesting. The only way that that really manifests is if you're already a software developer. Then when you vibe code something, you know where all the things are broken, you know what doesn't look right or work right, or and if there's a material bug, you can fix it. The thing that people are getting into trouble with is when they they don't know anything about software development. They vibe code something and they get a result, and then it shows up on a web page and they're like, okay, this is mostly there, but it's riddled with bugs, or they need to fix something material. They'll ask AI for the fix. It'll go modify a few files. They'll feel like it's getting work done. That'll introduce more bugs. They won't know what's going on. AI will try to fix that. It'll introduce more bugs. And it's just like you end up with this like dead end of files being overwritten and rewritten and overwritten, and AI will forget what it did 4 steps back, and now you end up with this like Frankenstein code base that, if you don't know how to actually fix it, you just throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm done with this. And that's really kind of why you saw Cursor came out, everybody was a genius vibe coding everything, and now you see like the vibe coding movement kind of died. Like, nobody's talking about, oh, hey, look, I vibe coded this in a weekend. It's because like the scaffolding and the bug fixing and the staging and the production releases and the really productizing these things is hard. And so the only way to really get to the point where it's like vibe coding feels magical is to understand to a good degree like what's happening under the hood. So that's, if from an education perspective, that's where I would just start. And you can use AI to sprinkle it in, but don't feel like AI is doing your job for you. Like, actually learn what's happening under the hood.
Right. No, I love that. Um, Do you like reading books? Do you like YouTube videos, podcasts? How do you get other maybe business education, lifestyle education?
It's a combination of things. Yeah, I like to listen to audiobooks, as I'm falling asleep, or it's a lot easier on the eyes. I People argue that you don't retain as much, but I just listen to things over and over again. So, like the psychology of money, for example. I
Yes.
listen,
Yeah.
I listened to that like, you know, 6 months ago or whatever, and then I just listened to it again. And the audiobook angle, as I'm falling asleep, kind of that can I can absorb a lot of information, especially if I'm re-listening. On some things, like especially if I'm like at a computer, I'm trying to learn something right then and there, then I'll find a video online about it, or find a tutorial or something that I can walk through, so I can literally step by step kind of go through it and do it while I'm reading it or watching it or listening to it. So a little bit of a combination of those kinds of things. I've also been, on Reddit for a very long time. I feel like people are finally waking up to Reddit, which is funny. But, like I've been on Reddit for like 16 years or something. And there's, if you know how to filter out the noise on Reddit, there's a lot of good information that you can glean just from like listening to people, and having them expose you to things that you didn't think about. So, I check Reddit. I mean, obviously, like we're on X. RAD TV as a platform has probably the most engagement on X, but we have a pretty decent Instagram account. We just don't post there as much. But on Instagram, I'll go through and create like these bookmark lists, which are pretty good. Like on Reddit, you can get on subreddits. On Twitter, you can follow a bunch of lists, which I follow a handful of lists on X. But then on Instagram, I have a bunch of different, like, one for business, one for investing, one for health and fitness, one, and so you have all of these different categories on there. And so when I log into Instagram, what I see for the most part is like productive information, instead of just getting dragged into the thirst trap spiral that they would love you to be in. And so Reddit becomes its own thing when I go into Reddit, and Instagram becomes its own thing when I go into Instagram, and X becomes its own thing. So each one of those platforms, I've spent enough time kind of curating that environment, so I don't end up getting into like brain rot when I'm in there, even though it's nearly impossible not. I mean, they really do try to get you into the brain rot hellhole. And a lot of the stuff is becoming bots now anyway, which is kind of ironic. We're sitting here talking about AI taking over, and it's actually the manifesting the dead internet theory, essentially. So yeah, it's being able to filter that stuff out. And my wife is already sending me stuff like fake hotels that aren't even real, and saying we should look at this to go stay here. And I'm like, sweetie, that's AI. Like, we're never staying there.
It is impossible to stay there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how I, you know, books at night, podcasts occasionally, social is kind of really filtered down into like specific use cases for how those conversations move on those platforms. And that's essentially how I consume all my info. And then talking to smart people like you, and in real life events, that is kind of priceless when it comes to knowledge and being in the right rooms with the right people. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, connections, man. Well, do you have a top couple books you want to give us for your top all-time favorite books to listen to?
Oh gosh. I mean, I love The Psychology of Money because it's top of mind. I've also been reading another book called The One Thing, which is really like the title kind of says it all, but it's all about like how can you narrow your focus down into what's the most important thing that you should be
Mm,
working on. It gives you examples of how easy it is to get distracted and get pulled in lots of different directions and feel like you're getting things done, but you're actually not getting anything done.
mm,
So that's a pretty good one. There's like some philosophical stuff like The Power of Now. I don't know if you've heard of that
oh
book,
yeah,
but
yep,
Eckhart
yep.
Tolle. Yeah. I come back to that book occasionally, and the audiobook's pretty good because it will calm you down and put you to sleep. But also just like the lesson about being present. And, I don't think people kind of lean into that enough. I mean, there's the idea that you think too much about the past or too much about the future and how that creates anxiety and depression and right and like we don't stop and smell the flowers. uh, there's a lot of strength and power in that kind of like
Mm,
being present, and that's so hard for us to do as humans. And so that there's kind of a constant reminder of that I love to come back to. And I forget myself too,
hmm.
but it really does help. Like just trying to be hyper present and take in the sights and sounds and smells and who you're with and who you're talking to and being in that conversation in that moment. And that simple thing goes such a long way. So yeah, there's a handful that have kind of stuck with me recently. There's a bunch of other ones like, 0 to 1, talks about scaling businesses. Yeah, just trying to absorb as much as I can, like from different stories about how people have gone through periods of focus and growth and, what the psychology of money is interesting because like how do people actually think, like what actually moves them from a financial perspective. So, yeah, those are a handful that I'd throw out there. Yeah.
Man, I love that. What's the your favorite quote? We'll do that.
My favorite quote. Oh gosh, I don't really have one off the top of my head.
You can think about it for a second.
Do or do not, there is no try.
I like that. I like that. Yoda.
Yeah. I actually say that to my kids all the time. Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things too where you catch yourself saying those words. We should give this a try or we should give this an attempt. Or it's like why are you even here? You know,
Mm,
like just go in. And it's one of those hardest things because as soon as you use the words like well, let's try it out, you immediately give yourself the
right.
opportunity to fail.
The opportunity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So well, we tried. Okay. Yeah, it's just so yeah, that one may be a little bit corny, but it is top of mind. I mean, I say it to my kids all the time, and my son hasn't even seen Star Wars yet. So when he when
Oh
when he
no.
starts to see it, he's gonna flip.
Yeah. No, I love Star Wars. I had the funniest thing, which is like super cringy, is I said that quote on part of my vows to my wife when we got married. It was
Yeah.
like private. It wasn't like in front of a bunch of people. We did it like private, just like us. And my that was like because I knew it would be funny, and she like it was like I will love you forever, And then I did the quote of Yoda, and she was like, I can't believe you put that in there because now it's like in recorded because we recorded or whatever. She's like, now that's in recorded for history, but I was like that's perfect. Um,
That's great.
but yeah, my 3-year-old son's loving Star Wars now. He just watched the first episode like 2 weeks ago, and he's like, "Oh, this is great." But
Nice.
and then
Nice.
so
Yeah.
my other to get back on track, my other question for you is, what is the worst advice you've ever heard, and what would be the alternative?
Uh, the worst advice. Uh, I mean, I know it's a little bit kind of it's the hustle, the idea of hustle, like the hustle culture is is interesting because, I think you have people telling you regularly that you have to hustle hard and you have to over execute and, you have to, you know, be on 24/7. And to a large degree, like I believe that if you love what you're doing, there isn't really a work-life balance. Like you love what you're doing, and so you're just doing the thing that you love, and it just so happens that you can also get paid to do it. And I think a lot of people confuse that, where they're like, I need to work hard to be successful, and I need to work 24/7 and not sleep and hustle harder than everyone, and it becomes a badge of honor. And you know, I agree that, like, if you love what you're doing, there isn't really a work-life balance. But I think people take that the wrong way. They the work-life balance is that you love what you're doing, so that is your life. You're essentially like, I'm sitting in a music studio. I have VR headsets surrounding me. I got a Bitcoin miners. I got, it's like I love what I'm doing, and if I'm on Discord or Twitter at midnight, because I'm out having drinks with friends or whatever, it's not because I'm hustling harder than anyone and that's my badge of honor. It's because I love what I'm doing. And so, I think in the early days of me trying to build companies, it's hearing that advice and hearing that energy. Like you have to lean into it. If you take that advice the wrong way, it's terrible. And I think that leads a lot of people into burnout territory, and not setting aside, like you always hear this about the most successful people, like Bezos and Bill Gates and Bob Iger and what you always hear about how they like wake up in the morning and they like give themselves time to breathe. They don't jump. They're not jumping right on their phone. They'll like, maybe they'll look at the newspaper. They're always giving themselves space to read books, and it's like that. If you're really kind of paying attention to yourself and like how to be the most successful you can be, it's that you're paying attention and being intentional about what you're doing all the time. It's not that you're working hard all the time and stressing out all the time and not sleeping. And so I took that advice early on the wrong way, and you see everybody else around you acting like that and behaving like that, so you take that in as like, oh shit, well I have to do this too, like this. And that's not true. Like the best days, I wake up and I have coffee and I don't look at my phone, and that's it, So, that I ease into the day with a clear head, and then I get on phone calls. Those are like the most productive. And when I'm working out regularly and like when I'm present, those are the best times.
I love that. Any final remarks? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I think we got it. Like you can go to RAD TV, we're radtv.com. You can check us out on X. Rad NFTV is our handle there. It's our handle kind of everywhere. Come join the Discord. We want to talk to creators, learn from creators, do as much as we can together. So, yeah, that's it. That's it.
I
This
love
is
that.
awesome.
Tony, how can we hear more about you? How can we follow your journey?
Oh yeah. I'm just Tony Mugavero on X. I'm out there. I'm on Instagram. I'm on X. Join TikTok. I don't have a huge account there, but I'm always in the Discord, always responding, to people live. I'm on LinkedIn. It's got all my history there. And so yeah, my DMs are open. Always, down to chat with people and have great combos. So yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you, Tony, for coming on. This has been Brandwith with John Klein. If you guys find value in this content, please consider subscribing, commenting, reach out to Tony, check out RAD TV, and I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.